Morning all. Now today I'm going to review this. It is an MPPT solar charge controller. It's called the MPPT-M20. I bought it on eBay. It cost about £25. So let's take a little look. So inside we have the controller itself, an unfathomable instruction leaflet, and this little plug which is the temperature sensor and plugs into that socket on the back of the controller. So first things first, let's put 12 volts onto the battery connections, which are the middle ones, and we get this display. Actually, that's about the best viewing angle. Okay, so let's have a look at what we've got on here. We've got a symbol of a battery with a percentage state of charge. Now it's saying 6%, which is pretty poor. But it's not surprising because my outside batteries are reading 10.2 volts. I must sort that out. And indeed it's showing the battery voltage as 10.2 volts there. The sun's going in and out, so it is changing. Now, disturbingly, this thing says up here, controller PWM. Shouldn't it say MPPT? Now, the display is not terribly readable. There's this sort of double reflection thing going on, but what we have on here is PV amps. We also have load amps. We've got the PV off voltage. Now, if this is PWM, if it controls battery voltage using PWM, which I certainly hope it does, this will be the set point voltage, the voltage that it takes the battery up to. That's set to 13.8. It is adjustable. Here we have load off, so the load will automatically switch off at 10.7 volts. And then be restored at, is that 12.6? Yeah, I think it is, 12.6 volts. And then there's a time thing here, 24 hours, and that's adjustable in 1 hour steps, and that's how long the load remains on after dusk. Now it seems that 4 of these fields are adjustable, so we press this button. This means we can adjust the set point voltage for PWM. That's pretty good. The next one is this 24-hour thing, adjustable in 1 hour increments, so that you can tell it how long to keep the load on after. How long to keep it on after it switches it on at dusk, and then after this period of time, it will switch it back off. The next one is yes, the load off voltage is adjustable, and the load on voltage is also adjustable. So those are the 4 adjustable parameters. Now there's also a temperature readout here. It's reading 0. That's because the plug's not in. So let's put that in, and that immediately jumps up to 21 degrees C, which is about right. That's what it is in the room at the moment. Okay, let's get this thing apart. Now there's a big, thick metal plate on the bottom. This is 3mm aluminium. By the look of it, it's pretty solid. Now, I don't like this construction where you've got the MOSFETs here simply pressing against the back of this aluminium plate, because although the plate is very thick, the PCB isn't, and it will bend a little bit. Actually, it's reasonably thick, but there is bow in there, so these center MOSFETs aren't going to get as much pressure against this plate as these end ones. And the other thing is, of course, these MOSFETs aren't all a standard thickness, so if they run out of some from one supplier and go to another and they're slightly thinner, then you're not going to get the same pressure on them. Okay, let's get this board out. Now this is an MPPT solar charge controller, maximum power point tracking. An MPPT is generally identifiable by a very large inductor. So let's have a look at the very large inductor on this board, if I can get it out. That's interesting. Maybe it's under the display, which conveniently comes off on plugs and sockets. Where's the very large inductor? I can't see it, can you? No very large inductor. So it's a con, it's a fraud, it's a rip-off, it's a fake. It's certainly not MPPT, but it might be PWM there is a microcontroller here. It's an ST microcontroller, so it should be PWM if we're lucky. Now there are two very large resistors here. They look like they're solid copper. Now they're marked 0.25 mR. So could they be 0.25 milliohms? That's a very, very low resistance. Both 1%. And over here you've got two op07, I think they're op07, op amps with the pots next to them. And I would imagine that these two op amps are multiplying the tiny voltage that's going to exist across these two resistors up to something that can be worked with by the microcontroller to give us those two readings on the display, which I'll put back on in a minute, of solar panel amps and load amps. Now there is a MOV down here to take out transients on the solar panel input, but there are no polyfuses anywhere. In fact, there are no fuses at all. So I'm assuming what they're doing in terms of protection is measuring solar panel current and load current and using the microcontroller to switch the MOSFETs, which we saw on the bottom of the board, off if there's an overload condition. But otherwise, there's very little on this thing. Yes, you get this fancy liquid crystal display, but apart from the 6 MOSFETs on the back and these two current measuring circuits and the microcontroller and a few other bits and pieces, this thing's not worth £25. I've been ripped off. Now, I did pay slightly over the odds for this thing, because if we do a search for MPPT-20A and set it to lowest price first, we've got a couple of those temperature sensor twiddly things. Now, there are lots of these charge controllers, which are all being called MPPT. They're clearly not, because they're too cheap, £8. But if we keep going down, yes, so this is the cheapest one that's the same as mine. Let's have a look at that. So that's £23.53. The seller is Penky 2011, but I mean that's likely to change from hour to hour. But that's a lot of money for a charge controller that's not MPPT. Now, I was kind of half expecting this to actually be an MPPT solar charge controller for that money, or at least a sort of attempt to be MPPT, a bit like the Wellesley attempts to be MPPT but fails miserably. But my hopes were dashed a couple of days before this thing arrived, when I was talking to my good friend Gaston, who said, "Have you seen this on AliExpress?" And here it is on AliExpress, and this seller shows it as a PWM controller, and in fact, all the way down the listing, he's got a photograph of the inside and a little, there's the board, and a little note here saying, "Notice, not true MPPT. There is no large transformer coil inside." So this seller acknowledges that the MPPT marking on the cover, and this one does have that marking there, is not true, fake. Now, in order to prove that this is not MPPT, and to find out whether it actually is PWM, I need to hook it up to my car battery and a solar panel. But unfortunately, it rained all night long last night, and it's very wet out here, and I'm going to have to wait till things dry out a bit.